the way I make my money is a bit interesting right now.
Do tell. Someone comes to you and they say, help me talk better. What's like some of the first things you go over with them?
Too often we fear being awkward, embarrassed, or weird when really we should be fearing.
Hello, I'm Andrew Hales. Welcome to another edition of Chatting With. I'm here with Chris Miller, conversational expert on loneliness. Thanks for being here, man.
Thank you for having me, man. It's I feel like MO is being able to talk to people in a lot of different settings. And now you're doing Chatting With. So it's only fitting to be able to talk about communication on here.
Yeah. So what makes you qualified?
I just call myself the expert. I'm just kidding. No.
I don't know.
Master's degree in communication, and I taught public speaking as the first job in my career. And then I did 2 communication roles for corporations. And now I do the Talk to People podcast, and I write the Social Fitness Lab newsletter. And I'm just really passionate about social connection because I feel like there's a ton of young adults out there who are very lonely and they're not talking to the people around them. There's a ton of reasons why. I'm sure that you and I could go through a lot of them, but it's important.
Sure. I mean, what's besides their phones and just addictions to devices, that seems like the main culprit, right?
Yeah, I think digital immersion is definitely a big culprit. We are very stimulated, like you said, addictions. We're hacked, our neurowiring. But the cities have changed a lot too. They're a lot less walkable. The amount for spontaneous interaction has gone down. We're not going to stores as much with Amazon. And there's less third places. So places to hang out, like the places you'd go and meet someone. Less people are going to church. So you're not really meeting their people. Virtual work, you're not meeting people at work. It's really on us to go out and meet someone.
Especially in adulthood, it's like you have to put in so much work to make friends and be friends. What are some ways adults can make friends, would you say? Because it's awkward. It's like, hey man, like in college, it's you kind of have friends automatically, and then because everyone's around each other. But adulthood is like, what's your advice for that?
I think most of the time, like you said, in adulthood, we're used to our built-in friends. So if you were to ask a lot of the people around you who their best friends are, more than likely they're going to say someone from high school or college, even though they're well beyond that span in their life, because it's really hard for us to replicate that, right? And regarding advice, the big thing is knowing that loneliness is it's a signal to our body. It's just like hunger or thirst. It's the fact that we need something needs to change. When you're hungry, you need to eat. It's okay to be hungry. It just means you need to eat soon, just like being thirsty. It's normal. Loneliness is like that too. It just means that it's a signal that we need more social connection. And there's a lot of ways to do it, right? Like people argue for social media saying it's a good way to get connectedness. But the research shows that face-to-face, in-person interaction has much richer payoffs, and it actually requires a lot less energy. Like doing this right here, like Zoom, or Riverside, it's pretty easy. The fact that I could be working on something and hop on here and talk with you, and you could be talking to somebody and you're trying to figure out what they're doing in Panera.
Right.
But it is actually a bit more energy expenditure because I don't exactly know, I can't pick up on as much as I could if I were there with you in person. So we're probably more likely to interrupt one another here. And due to that, we're thinking a lot and there's a lot more that we have to fill in. So the in-person interaction seems to be the best. And then if you think about that, it's like, okay, well, then I probably should investigate around me what's in person. And that's typically where people should start, is looking where they could actually go and show up to. Because I always advocate having a good local support net, and then you can go digital, you can go out. But a lot of us are doing it backwards. We go on Reddit or Twitter or Discord and try and find communities, which is better than doing everything by yourself, but you need the people in person, like you for Nashville. Would you consider yourself fairly lonely, or would you say you're pretty fulfilled with your social connection, or where are you on that?
I don't consider myself lonely. I would have about 4 years ago, though, before I met Carly, for sure. It was just me and my dog living in my apartment, and I still had friends and stuff here and there, but it was becoming more and more a chore to like meet up and hang out with people and do stuff with people. But yeah, no, I don't consider myself lonely now.
Yeah. The cool part about like being able to move around and go to Nashville and all that is that there's a lot of young people there. And I think sometimes that's the answer, is to move. And a lot of people are actually up for it, but they're nervous and scared. But whenever they move, you can reinvent yourself, and you can go and you can find all of the new things whenever you move into town. So I don't know if that helped out for you or not.
Yeah, it's just a nice restart, just starting somewhere new and fresh. And we slowly built our network out here.
What exactly drove you to create the Chatting With series?
I'm very curious. I like to ask a lot of questions. I thought, hey, this could be good content if I just do some interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much it, yeah. How about you? Why'd you start your podcast?
Similar. I think that it was funny, right? Because it's the Talk to People podcast, and the whole purpose of it is to help encourage others to be more inquisitive about those around them. Like, there are such cool people around us, and more than likely, we really don't have to go far. Like, our parents, there's stuff about our parents that we have no idea about, or grandparents, or like our neighbors.
That's a good point.
Yeah, all around us. So it's pretty obtainable, like the accessible end goal. But I started with like 40 in-person conversations, and it would be like a professor or like a Olympic gold medalist or a door-to-door vacuum salesman. I was trying to really get like the contingency there. And then I went to virtual, and then I was like kind of getting burnt out, and I went to, now it's just me talking on a microphone, like 20 questions you can ask to keep conversation going, or like one framework that you can use, like the Ford method. Like there's all these different frameworks that people use to keep social situations alive. And
right.
Doing that, so kind of like equipping people. But it is interesting seeing the content change. But it's all about, I'm just trying to get people to talk to people more, right? Mm-hmm. And it's funny because there's so many different ways to do that. Like you could create an event where you actually invite people, or like equip people, or showcase conversation. But it's quite similar to yours. It's just curiosity.
Hierarchy of needs. Wasn't that something people taught in school?
Yeah, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to where you have like shelter at the bottom. Like you have to think about shelter before you think about the NBA type deal.
Where does social interaction come in? Is that on the needs at all?
Yeah, for sure. It's one of the biggest needs. The research on loneliness is crazy. If you are someone who like is chronically lonely, statistically, you're more unhealthy being chronically lonely than you would be if you smoked 1 pack of cigarettes a day. You are more unhealthy statistically than living a sedentary lifestyle. It increases inflammation and stress, which ultimately increases everything, like the prevalence of a lot of bad stuff.
How do they figure that out?
There's this UCLA loneliness scale. It's like a 16-point scale that they've like made 3 times. The big breakthroughs are, I got a couple other books, but I don't want to make your list too long. But the big breakthroughs are like, there's this Dr. John Cacioppo, who is a psychologist at University of Chicago. And he was the real first big one who was like, hey, loneliness is a signal, and we need to listen to loneliness. It's just like thirst and hunger. It's signaling to our bodies that we need something that we don't currently have in order to thrive. Then there's this professor named Dr. Julian Holt-Lunstad, who did this big research about mortality that showed people who were more lonely lived shorter lives. It like takes, I don't know what it is, like 7 years off your life. And then the last thing, it's coming to an end here, but the last thing is there's the Harvard Happiness Study, which is the longest longitudinal like social science study. And they've studied the same cohort of people over 7 decades. And the biggest indicator of that study is that the number one thing you need for a happy and healthy life is high quality social relationships. So whenever you start to put all of this stuff together, it makes sense why people are doing pretty bad, because they don't have people in their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And reading the text from your friend on your phone, it doesn't cut it.
It doesn't cut it. There's a hierarchy there, right? Like a easy way to think about it is how many senses are currently being stimulated. So, like if I am texting you, I mean, I'm not even seeing your face. I'm just seeing characters. Like some people just heart messages now, right? Like,
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. Yeah.
yeah, you'll ask a question and they'll put exclamations on there, and you're like, okay. Um, and then it goes to being able to hear your voice, right? Because tonality, pacing, pitch, volume, all of that indicates like our nonverbal processing unit in our brain. We learn a ton there. And then FaceTime, then in person. So the more senses you can stimulate when you spend time with one another, more likely the more rewarding it's going to be.
Right. Are we doing all the senses right now?
No. So if we were together, I would, like, if you make a joke, I'd say, oh, that's a good one, right? And I'd like hit your arm or something.
So
I would,
touch. Yeah, touch is the only one missing, right?
no, I'd show up with like a, are you a dessert guy? You like desserts?
Sure.
Yeah. So I'd show up with, like, my wife makes really good monster cookies, like peanut butter and M&M and chocolate chips in there. And I'd show up with one of those and we'd be able to break bread together. Like they call it commensality, like coming together. There's a reason why Jesus sat there with his disciples and broke bread, right? Like it brings people together, eating together. So taste and then smell. Like if
Right.
you go to a church and they have just brewed a coffee, or you go and you tour a home and the home smells like chocolate chip cookies, right? It's like our taste, we really associate things there. So I think that's why, like whenever you have really big conferences for work, they cover food. There's going to be like entertainment there. Like we know this stuff. It's not new stuff. It's just, we don't think about it whenever we're thinking about like friendship or day-to-day life. We ultimately think about the blowback of not having it, and how that sucks. But fascinating.
What's your take on introversion and extroversion? Some people, isn't it healthier for them to recharge and be by themselves?
The concept of the social battery is really cool, right? Like we all have a social battery and it's sized differently. Like you may have a AAA, I may have a AA, right? Like you may love going out there and talking to people for hours and I may only need 30 minutes. And that's how they like deplenish, right? But then we charge up differently too, because there are people that go out there and they can talk and they can really be charged up. And knowing how your social battery charges and knowing how it depletes is very helpful knowledge, because many people will feel like they're not good with people. And a big reason why is they're actually socially exhausted and they need to rest. So then they need to put themselves in less places. And then on the other side of the house, many people won't feel like they're good with people because they're not doing it enough. So they need to go out there and get more of that. So that's a lot of self-awareness. And that's, like, I'm sure a lot of what you've seen, whenever you're talking to a lot of people out there, it's mainly what's going on up here. There's this thing called maladaptive social cognition. And it's essentially us thinking less of how others perceive us. And there's a lot of different psychological concepts here, like the spotlight effect. We think everybody's looking at us or laughing at us or talking about us. And
Yeah.
if you can reflect on that more, it will really help like in-person interactions.
Right. We're just grains of sand.
Yeah.
And everyone's in their own world.
Seriously, the skull-sized kingdoms. And it is refreshing to remember that, but it can also be a bit, disturbing. But I like the idea of how, like, you could be in a totally different state, I could be in a totally different state, and we're both interacting with like all of the people, be it virtually or in person. We're learning a whole bunch of stuff, and then you and I get to come together, and then later on it'll be completely different people in the next 100 years. But I mean, it's got to be going somewhere, right?
Right. Do you do one-on-one interviews with people, like clients?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's like, the way I make my money is a bit interesting right now.
Do tell.
I have, from the podcast, I had the local like Boys and Girls Club reach out to me and they're like, hey, we want to make a podcast. So then I was like, okay. And they liked how I was building it. So I started creating programs for them and they would pay me per program. So it'd be like a 4-week program teaching the Boys and Girls Club how to podcast. And then they're like, hey, could you produce the podcast for us? So I do the podcast strategy. I'd show up with the equipment and I'd charge them for that. And that kind of gave the base model for other nonprofits. So that's the majority of my income right now, is helping nonprofits produce podcasts, because a lot of them really want to make an impact. They want to know what they hope to do, but their messaging isn't the best. And then one of them was like, hey, we want to do a YouTube channel. I haven't had a ton of YouTube success, but at least I've had a little bit of time there and like reading little books on it. So I make money that way, helping nonprofits just come up with like content roadmaps, and then meeting with individuals like salesmen or people who lead an organization to help them prep for whatever they're about to do. So one-on-one, we go through what we call the rhetorical situation. So it's like, what do you want to do? Who do you want to tell it to? Why do you want to do it? And just a roadmap.
Right. Would you say you're more on the dating coach side or more just talking to anyone side?
I have a hard time with the dating coach side.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that,
like, have people come to you kind of asking more about how to, is that like been the root of their problem? Or
dating's a big thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like there are people my age, there are people your age, there are people who, I think dating's incredibly important. I think it is the like social battleground for a lot of people, very high stakes. Like people want to have a family, people want to have sex, there's a lot that can come from the dating game. So, and the whole premise of it, other than how you look, is like how you can actually connect to people, make people laugh.
Someone comes to you and they say, help me talk better. What's like some of the first things you go over with them?
Why are they coming to me in the first place? Like, what in the past has made them feel like they need to improve at articulating their thought? What are moments where they feel like they fell short? How would they actually like to sound or communicate? What exactly are their goals? Is there an area in their career or in their job? Is it dating? Is it they don't feel connected at all to their family? Like, all that information is so integral because people are so different. There are people who really require like a ton of substantial conversation, and there are other people who don't. And
so they say, I'm really shy and quiet and awkward, and I want to change that.
Yeah. Why?
So
why would you want to change that?
Because I want to be able to connect with people better.
Where do you have most of your relationships? Where have you gotten them from currently? Or do you have any at all?
Just my family.
Your family?
Co-workers a little bit.
And what is it about your coworkers that you most connect over?
Not really anything right now.
But you talk to them?
Yeah, here and there.
That's good. That's much better than the alternative of not talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are your hobbies?
I like to watch movies or whatever, go skateboarding.
Mm-hmm. Are you sponsored skateboarder?
No.
Who are your favorite skateboarders? Be honest with me.
Chris Jocelyn, I don't know, Heath Kirchart, okay. And then what?
And then what about Rodney Mullen?
Okay.
Or Andrew Reynolds?
Yeah, they're good. Yeah.
Well, I think it's really good that you have your hobbies and you're obviously interested in connecting with the people around you. I mean, the biggest thing is going out to where people are. You have to show up. Are there places around you that are hosting skateboarding events or that are hosting cinephile events talking about movies?
Yeah.
It's showing up, reaching out, replacing, looking at your schedule and replacing time that aren't people facing with opportunities where you could meet people. It's all about like putting yourself out front. It's the repetitions. And the second thing is like recovering. I think many of us aren't actually going out there because there's things we need to recover from. Like if we're sick, if we don't feel well, it's not going to be easy for us to meet people. If we're in a ton of debt, and we feel a ton of financial pressure and it's crippling, that's going to be really hard to meet people. So that's another really big area, is to take an assessment there. But
Like help yourself. Yeah.
yeah, and like you kind of posit and you make the example here, it can be tough to do it in a 2-minute setting, right? And
Right.
give
Yeah.
really transformative information that's going to help people. But the
Yeah.
big thing is like the fact that people are reaching out to even get friendship, man, that's so much better than if they didn't, because that means they got that dog in them.
Do you consider yourself an extrovert?
Yeah. What about you?
No, I'm an introvert.
Mm-hmm. And
Have
have you always known that?
how do you define that? Like you get energy from talking to people?
I think that, yeah, I think that's the general premise, is that extroverts are out of the box more likely to go into interaction. They're more likely to feel charged by it, and they're more likely to look forward to future interaction.
I like interacting with people just fine. It does take a lot of energy from me.
Yeah. And that's okay, right? Like
Yeah.
that is,
Like I don't know if there's anything that can ever change that, you know?
yeah. Does it feel like there's a lot more energy cost when you're interacting with
Oh,
Carly?
Carly? No.
Yeah. So that's not taxing on you, right?
No.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the paradox with like friendships and relationships, is it is the most taxing whenever we don't know people. Like you and I have just met. So the 30 minutes here, I wouldn't consider it taxing, but I would consider like we have to figure out kind of where we want to take the conversation, right?
Gotta build
So-
rapport.
Build rapport. But we
Yeah.
get, even though it's the most taxing, we get like the least amount of relational rewards. So compared to if we were to have a conversation with someone who we did know, it would be less taxing. And then we'd feel like, oh, that was a really good hang. It was really cool to see my best friend and have a ton of laughs. We didn't feel like it costed us anything. Instead, we got everything. So it's like a mountain, and you have to get over that peak, and to get to that point to where it's really tough. But the cool research is that the people who you think are your best friends may not think that you're their best friend. And what this shows us is that it's just really important for us to have people who are close to us, that we know that they'll be there for us, even if they're like, not our high school buddies, and it's really hard to get them.
Yeah. I mean, how can you tell if someone's on the same level, I guess, as being your best friend or not, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's
I
a
don't
big
know.
fear, because vulnerability, self-disclosure, and reciprocity. There's like this theory called the social penetration theory, and they always show an onion, like whenever you're looking at the graph, and it's that humans are like onions. We have so many different layers, but the nuance is that these layers are different for each one of us. So like I may be very guarded whenever it comes to something like money. Meanwhile, you may not be guarded at all. So on day one, like on this chat, you may be talking about like, oh, I made $2,000 yesterday, and I have this much money in the bank.
Right.
Meanwhile, someone else won't say that. So not only do we have to navigate all of the layers that are different, but the closer we let someone get to us, we give them what we call weaponry, because we're more vulnerable. So they know more about us, and they know how to hurt us. And we're constantly thinking about this. So to get on the same page, it's quite rare. And that's probably why a lot of people have a hard time making good friends.
Yeah. That's interesting that it's like it's hard and it sucks at first, and no rewards, and then eventually you click, and then it's all good.
It's a paradox. And that's the discouraging part, is that the people who need to be reached out to the most are actually the less likely to do it. And there's this, I forget where they did it, but it's like the science of reaching out. And the people, like whenever you reach out to someone, you think it's going to be a bit bothersome, but they went in and they like pulled the other side of the house, and it means so much. So we don't think it's going to mean a lot. It turns out it actually means a ton. So we don't reach out. And then the people who actually need to be reached out to aren't likely to reach out. So
Yeah.
it does seem a bit bleak, but there's like, that's why we're here, is to connect with one another. The majority of our brain is thinking about social situations.
You've been making friends out in Kansas?
Yeah, I put together a soccer program. It's called Morning Soccer Pickup, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5:45 a.m.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's been big. And nobody was here playing soccer pickup on a routine basis. So I created it. And that's like one of also my big philosophies is sometimes you have to create a third place.
How did you do that? With like Meetup? Like what app did you use?
I found like the big thing is just finding existing infrastructure. So there's this big Lawrence Adult Soccer League where they have a huge network of people who are interested in soccer, yet not all of them are participating. And then tapping into that, and I emailed them 4 times, and on the 4th time, one of the board members agreed to send it out to that network. And then just talking to people in person, being like, hey, I do this. So now we routinely have like 20 different guys. Sometimes it's 30, sometimes it's 15, but from like a hand surgeon to a pastor to someone who works on a factory floor in quality inspection. So a really big, broad range there.
Smart. You got up at 5:45? Or you got
This
at 5
morning.
this morning? Wow.
Yeah, I was playing soccer this morning. So it's a
Man.
little, it's funny though, because like it'll make me feel a bit productive. And then I'm like, okay, no, but I actually need to work on my job.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What should I ask you?
it's a great question. That's always the pressure I feel whenever I'm hosting a podcast. There are so many different ways to take it, and it's overwhelming.
Yeah, and there's so many different factors, like what way you woke up on the bed this morning and your mood,
Right.
and like did you run before, and like it's yeah, like don't you feel like health plays such a huge part in being social as well, because it's like you're
A huge part.
yeah, you need that, like that makeup, of good health, that glow.
You do. There's the like the communication model. It's the basic visual for an interaction. You have your sender and your receiver on either side, and the sender will encode a message. They'll say something. The receiver decodes it. They figure out what the person's saying, and then they say it back, and the receiver or the sender decodes. So it's like a conversational loop. But in between all of that like messes with the message that's being encoded and decoded is noise. And noise is referred to as like the physical noise of like you're talking and your dog's barking or there's construction going on. That's difficult. But the other side of the noise is like all the psychological noise. Like if you're not feeling well, if you are thinking about something else, if you're preoccupied, all of that affects the message. So thinking about reflecting on that noise is really important. And I think that's the benefit of working out, is it gives us a lot of mental clarity, and it also gives us the ability to focus better. And whenever we're more focused and we're more clear in our thinking, we're more likely to honor people in conversation, make them feel better about themselves, make them feel like they have value because we're actually listening and thinking about what they're saying. So I think working out is super important.
Yeah,
Are you
creating that like aura, of
Yes.
just feel good vibes?
Yes, like your goal, my goal in conversation is to make the other person feel like they're the only person in the room. And too often we fear, I call it AEW, being awkward, embarrassed, or weird, when really we should be fearing not adding value. And by not adding value, I mean like not letting the other person know that they're valued, like actually giving them our focus and time. And then also like bringing stuff to the table that could help that individual. It's like adding value that way. And that's like, we get to pick our fears when it comes to social interaction. If you decide, of course, there's social embarrassment and it's sharp, it stings. Like even right now, you and I could say something and fumble and there'll be a long silence and it's like, he's figuring out what to say, that exists. But if I come on here or if you come on here and you're like, all right, I'm just going to try and have a good combo, make Chris or make Andrew feel like, it was fun to see him today. Like we can get somewhere.
I memean, I might cut this out, but like, you heard of NoFap and that
Yeah.
whole movement?
Dude, I would love to talk to you about that.
All right, sweet. Yeah, it's a little taboo, you know.
Do you think that porn and jerking off has made us less able to connect with those around us?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and tell me, I agree, but would you like tell me more about that?
Oh, I'm scared. You cut out for a little bit, but now it's good.
Once we started talking about no fap, it starts cutting out.
The internet's like, no, no.
Yeah, they're taking down something that hasn't even happened. But like, how
Okay,
did
there you
you
go.
come about that? Was it religion that brought you there, or was it something else that brought you there?
I mean, no, growing up Mormon, they definitely teach you not to do that, but they don't really give you a good enough reason why not to, other than that it's a sin and don't do it. You know, I got into it again probably like around 26 years old. Just people talking about it, like, wait, really? Like you'll be more confident and happier and talk to people better if you just retain your semen or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started getting into it, and I noticed a difference. What's your stance on that? Do you think it's like a bunch of hocus pocus, or?
I think that I'm totally fascinated by it, and I go to church every Sunday. Like they definitely talk negatively about porn. Nobody talks about like masturbation or jerking off or what that does. They all take like a hard stance on porn, and I don't think porn's helpful. I think that for the net large, like it's not had a good impact on society. I'll read I'll read things that talk about like a silver lining for it or something like that. But I think the case to make for porn being beneficial for society is much harder to make than it not being helpful. Especially right now, the fact that we are so digitally immersed and people are meeting less people, they're just watching more porn. They're jerking off more. They're like getting that dopamine release. And it's creating stasis that typically we would get from other things. I think like it's definitely a vice where people should be talking about. Like even me growing up,
Do you talk about it with your clients?
no, I've never had a client where like who
Yeah, that
approaches
might
me
be
who's like,
weird.
I'm in high ticket sales and I'm like, have you jerked off before this call? Right. Like your energy's off. Right.
Yeah.
But I do think it matters. And I think my goal in the long run is probably to get a bit more holistic to where I may be able to touch, like it definitely, that comes with baggage, like going into areas like that in people's lives. But it definitely comes with benefits too, because more people need to be thinking about stuff like that because it affects them.
Do you meditate every day?
No, I don't. Do you?
No.
Do you,
Um,
do you exercise though?
yeah. I've been running a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's helpful. But what for me, sometimes I will have negative self-thought regarding like work and feeling like I need to be a lot more productive or making more money. Like how have you navigated that?
Oh yeah. Every day. Every day. Every second.
Yeah. Have you found any keys for that or like
Uh, you just do the best you can. Yeah, you try not to compare yourself too much to others, and remember that everyone's in their own world with their own problems. And money, at the end of the day, money's not that important. But yeah, you definitely, you don't want it to overwhelm you. So
yeah.
you just do your best.
It's it's so paradoxical because the more you think about it, the more desperate you feel, and I feel like it constricts creativity. And
Yeah.
creativity is one of the biggest things we need to connect with those around us, like be it through content or in person. Like you gotta be creative.
Yeah. It's weird because, yeah, with the stress of surviving definitely overpowers any, will to be creative or anything. So you like kind of have to figure that out first. So
Yeah. And that's been hard because in the corporate job I had consistent income. They were paying me whenever I traveled, they paid me more. They took care of all the food, all the travel, like a lot of my expenses that you don't think about, they were also covered. So whenever I left, it was a big shift. And now, like there was definitely I had a margin, but then like getting to that point to where you're like, man, that margin is shrinking, and you have to be more creative about how you're acquiring clients, and you have to be more creative about how one client can turn into another client. And I do have a goal about creating content that could be helpful to people. So then whenever you think about that too, you're like, oh man, here we go. But it's a journey.
do you journal? How do you create space in your mind?
Working out is a big one. And then, so I'll do soccer in the morning, and then I'll go back to the gym and I'll do weightlifting. And I try not to listen to anything while I'm doing that. I have a golden
Really?
retriever who's like 3.5, and I'll take him on a lot of walks. Um,
You don't listen when you work out?
I'll try not to.
How
I'll
come?
try to, because I am of this. I've been of this philosophy lately, and you'll have to weigh in on this. But I do think that most of us are chronically multitasking, and I think the impact of that is that it diminishes our performance of just about everything we do. I think as a society, we think we've become so much more efficient and better, but really we just have a lot better technology. So whenever I am at home, I'll be like watching something. I may have a laptop up, like trying to create something for a client, and then I'll be texting someone on my phone. 3 different screens that no matter whether I'm trying to or not, I am literally paying attention to all 3 of them at least a little bit. Um, and I think it really attacks our mindfulness and our presence and our ability to be still. So like whenever I'm at the gym, I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm going to try not to look at myself in the mirror too much. I'm just going to try and focus on the weights.
Hmm.
To be,
Interesting.
yeah, to be present.
Right. Just be more present. What's your favorite book that's changed you?
Man, I have it nearby. Can I go grab it?
Show me. Yeah, show me.
Yeah. Okay. That way you can be like, decide whether or not you want to grab it. It's called Reclaiming Conversation.
All right. Never heard of it. Huh.
All right. Can I quickly sell you on this book?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So it's by Sherry Turkle, who taught at MIT. She may still teach at MIT. I'm not sure. I haven't like checked, but she taught at MIT, and she's around like the best minds in technology, right? Like cutting edge stuff.
Yeah.
And she made the observation that all social media is promising connectedness, but what it turns out is it's not a good substitute for in-person interaction. Rather, it's a poor substitute. It can be used as a supplement, but not a substitute. So she goes through this whole entire thing, reclaiming conversation, and the whole idea is like getting back to a point to where that seems a bit more normal. And she talks about AI's impact on babysitting, or how social media has affected us here, or technology's impact on relationships, and her ability to navigate this push and pull on the push of technology and innovation that we definitely need, but also the preservation of our ability to connect with those around us. It's magnificent.
Hell yeah. How many times have you read it?
I've read it. I've read the whole thing once. It's like, but then I'll go in and I'll read different parts.
Cool.
So there's like chapters for everything, and it's a thick book, but it's one of those that once you read it, you'll definitely feel inspired, and you'll be like chatting with, yeah, here we go.
Let's go.
Yeah. Or like talking to, like, let's get it. Quick question. How do you hype yourself up when you're about to go record one of those videos? Like talking to?
Drugs. No, running. I have a little routine I prepare for. If I have time, I'll do the cold plunge. That takes the prep time is getting a little tedious because you put in the ice cubes and you have to wait like a half hour.
Yeah, right. 30 minutes later, you're in a different mind space.
Yeah, but that helps. I usually will abstain from PMO for the days leading up to it and save up all that aura energy, and then
If you slip up, are you like, I got to push it?
yeah, I mean, they're all just tiny things that help like 5%, you know. So
Okay.
at the end of the day, if I have to do it, then I'll do it, and you just get through it, and you try to edit the shit out of it so it doesn't, you know. But but yeah, like if I'm like fully prepared, it will be like 5 days retention, working out every day, eating clean, perfect sleep, 300 milligrams of caffeine, and I'm just locked in, and it goes great, but it's it can be tricky though too. Like it's some people just aren't. People don't talk. People suck at talking. You were very easy to talk to.
Thank you. So are you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there a trend with people who are good to talk with and not good to talk with when you're out in person?
Is there a trend when there's people to like how? What do you mean? Can you ask that a different way?
Like, for instance, some people would say younger people are less likely to chat or.
Oh yeah. That's why I still go to colleges sometimes. Younger people are definitely more spunky, and they haven't got slapped in the face with life quite yet,
Yeah.
And yeah, I usually stay away from older people. They don't want to talk. It's funny. So, I think that's normal though. It's like the older you get, the less you care about what other people think of you, and you're tired of other people's BS, and you don't, so you reserve your energy more. And I think that's what older people have figured out,
Yeah. It's survival.
So, yeah.
Like resource management, rationing everything.
Yeah. Have you found that like older people are kind of, well, but on the flip side, then they have all this wisdom, and they know how to talk to people. They just don't always want to.
Yeah. I think that it's in my head, it's like your ability to navigate and like take it out of them. Cause it's a weird thing. The second loneliest cohort in like our US demographic are people who are like 20 to 35, like young adults. But the most lonely are people who are post-retirement. And after you retire, like typically your sense of purpose oftentimes in the US is associated with our work. And then we lose our people, and we get worse at talking to people. And even though we need it more, it's a social muscle, so it atrophies without use. So like the loneliness manifests in ways that aren't pro-social. So ways that's why we have the stereotype of like the crummy old man who says, get off my lawn, right? Like he really needs people to come over and reach out and hear his stories. But it's like this property and this like, get away. So getting in there, and I think having a bit of tolerance for things that may go south, but really expressing like, hey, I'm interested in you, is the best. Like my sister-in-law works for like a retirement community, and they love her, but it took a couple weeks of like snide remarks and things that didn't feel well. But now she's like, feels really bad about even thinking about leaving because she's added so much like value and fulfillment to them.
That's a noble profession. That'd be hard. Old
It
folks
is.
at home. Yeah.
It is. It's a huge profession.
Yeah.
It's growing like crazy.
I'm glad people are willing to do that.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever end up there. I mean, as a worker, that's what I mean. But yeah, maybe when I'm 80 though, yeah.
Maybe as an inmate.
Yeah.
Right. I have today
Gosh.
I'm editing a podcast with one of my former professors who's like 75, and I went to North Carolina and I had a conversation with him.
Wow.
And
wait, so are your podcast interviews in person and you travel for them?
Some of them.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes. And typically I'll like go meet someone who like I've had a good time with in the past.
And they're
Or
and are they always videoed or no? It's
this
just
one is my first one in like a year and a half with no video. So
okay.
there's just me, the mics, and the deck. But
Cool.
he talks a lot about, he was a communication professor, but he was a director of debate. So he would get people together to talk and disagree, and they'd have to go flip on sides. But he's meeting with the retirement home because they want to create a debate team for the retirement home and have the residents debate one another. And he's like, it's going to be perfect because they have stories to share and they have opinions.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. So like imagine like all of these people debating on something.
You know what I've wanted to do is do a series where I wear like a referee shirt, and I'll have like a Republican and a Democrat. I don't know how I'll find them, but
Yeah.
they just go at it, and I'll blow the whistle every time they start talking over each other, and I
That
think
would be awesome.
it could be really funny if we did it right.
Yeah. The people love that stuff. People love,
Yeah.
I mean, there's one way to do it, like the whole Ben Shapiro destroys this leftist, right? Like
Yeah.
that's one style of content. But then the other style of content is like that wholesome conversation with two people disagreeing. And
No, I'd want the wholesome. I don't want to rage bait or clickbait, you know. Or
Right.
just, I don't want it to be tacky, but you know, yeah. I want it to expand both sides' minds on the issues.
Mhm.
It feels like, and maybe create a less divided nation, you know.
Hey,
So-
that sounds like a fun project, and you'll have to keep me posted.
You have any bad habits?
I think like talking about
As the vape is coming out of my mouth.
right. Talking about money, like that's a bad habit of mine, is like worrying about money at times to where I can't actually do something about it, right? Like we hosted a group of friends from Arizona this past weekend, and we're all having fun, like hanging out. It's Saturday night, had dinner, and like sometimes I'll find myself being worried about finances or money, and there's a reason why I want to make money. It's because I need money, right? Like Annie and I,
It's like oxygen. Yeah.
right? Like my wife and I, we want to like build a family soon, so like thinking about provision like that and stuff like that. But like stress, money, that's tough. I think the reason why I talked to you about jerking off, like that's something that I find myself probably reaching out to mood, baseline, like stabilization, trying to get a dopamine hit. And I have to be intentional about not doing that. But thankfully, like I don't drink alcohol, I don't drink coffee, I don't drink soda, I don't do drugs. Like there's a lot of things that I'm not tempted by, and I'm quite grateful for that.
You definitely don't come across as someone that has a problem with substances. So, and that's a compliment.
Yeah. And sometimes those people are brilliant, right? Like I think,
Right. Yeah. I don't know. All
like
the
Chris-
writers, all the directors, you know, whatever.
you remember Chris Farley, the comedian?
Yeah. No, I actually read his biography. It's really good.
And he was a social tornado, right? Like he could come into a room and make you feel like $1 million, make you laugh, and then he'd leave, like going to the next party to get wasted, right? Like it's a conundrum. I think addictive patterns with substances sometimes can be really hard because the people can be really charismatic.
What blows my mind is he was, you know, he hit rock bottom, and then he went to rehab, and he was clean for like 2 or 3 years or something. And
Yeah.
then he relapsed and like died soon after. So yeah, and that was like during the, you know, Beverly Hills Ninja years. And so it just blows my mind how like someone can go that long and then relapse and then it's over. It's like it's never over.
Yeah,
You know?
no. It's hearing stories like that makes you think like, hey, it's cool that I'm crushing it now, but like
Stay vigilant. Yeah.
stay vigilant, or like vice versa, like, hey, I may not be crushing it now, but I can recover.
Well, this has been wonderful. We should do this again like a few months down the line.
Let's do it. Let's reconnect and let's see how the talking to people's going.
Yeah, I mean, I already got like 4 solid ones that I'm sure I'll upload, and I'll probably do it like every Wednesday or something.
Mm-hmm.
Any last words? Check out Chris Miller's channel.
Talk to Chris Miller. Talk to Chris Miller and Talk to People podcast.
Link in the description.
Talk
to Chris Miller. Talk to People podcast.
Thank you. Shout out to the sponsor.
Oh, well, yeah, I might not have a sponsor this time. Like I had to complete this like 6-month contract for BetterHelp, but that might be over now. So
sometimes you crack me up because I had watched like your video where you were like your update and
yeah,
you talk about the sponsor and then you would like do the ad read and then you just crack up at yourself doing the ad read.
Yeah.
and that was like one thing I was thinking about, like oftentimes you approach someone and you like talk to them maybe in like your prank videos or something and you leave laughing, okay, and you're like, oh my gosh, like laughing. What is that emotion? Is that emotion like, I can't believe I just did that, or like, oh man, that felt so awkward, or like
you'll have to, I need context for the exact, like what like sometimes it is like, oh, that was really funny. Sometimes it's like, wow, that I'm in so much pain from looking like an ass that all I can do is laugh to help numb the pain a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's a blast. I love the mission, what you're doing. It's always fun to talk.
Appreciate it. Yeah, man.
And your creativity. Like, I'm grateful for your creativity because it's helping people. I think it encourages people to connect with those around them, right? Like, you're following your curiosity, and that's the goal.
It's the goal. All right. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Sounds good. Bye.